this is a really fascinating area to me, but it essentially has to do with like locus of control. And what I've seen again and again in recovery from severe addiction is that, especially people with the severest forms of addiction, that eventually the only thing that really gets them into recovery is to give that locus of control over to a power greater than themselves. Now, that doesn't need to be a deity necessarily. It could be the mystery of the universe, or it could be, my AA fellowship, or it could be, the power of love. But basically, it's the acknowledgement, at least, with severe addiction, that when I'm in charge and only relying on myself and my own decision making, things go awry. So I need to acknowledge with humility that I'm not actually in control of what's going on here. And that the harder I try to work to, contain or manage or control my life, the worse things actually get. So there's this amazing pivot that occurs when people give up that sense of control to a higher power and let instead life unfold, and try to commune with that higher power either through meditation or prayer or going to meetings or fellowship or what have you, that people then begin to be able to access a wisdom and a strength that otherwise they don't have access to, and then begin to make much better decisions in their lives.
So is this higher power just anything that's outside of you that has more control over you than you do of yourself? Because if that's the case, I can imagine that everyone believes in a higher power. Well, if you're a Marxist, you believe it's the corporations. If you're a capitalist, maybe it's the government. If you're someone who doesn't like your job, maybe it's your boss. That person has so much more power than me. And I imagine that that's not terribly helpful in the way that when people say believe in a higher power or recognize that there's a higher power and that will help you through your addiction. I imagine that that's not what's meant. So please delineate what's meant by higher power.
Yeah, great point. So to clarify further, the higher power is something higher than any human agency. So not just higher than my human agency, but higher than any human being could possibly. So it's there's no other human being or human element that could solve this problem, right? So it's something meta, it's something outside of human agency and human understanding. It's much, much higher than that.
Yeah. I don't know if there are studies on this, but is it more powerful if it's considered to be divine, a divine higher power? Or is it more powerful if it's a secular higher power? Like it must be the objective universe that has no emotion.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like our language in this space is so limited, because I don't think it needs to be necessarily a divine human power. And yet I'm not sure calling it a secular human power really fully captures it. I believe very strongly that it doesn't even really need necessarily to be defined. And this is in some ways the genius of AA. It's a higher power according to your understanding. So, I mean, I don't think you need to define it. For some people, it's very important to define it. It's important for them to know, is this God? If so, whose God is it? What religion is this going to be associated with? But for many people, that's not important at all and proves not to be the critical element. It's really more a profound stance of humility and willingness, and acknowledging that I don't know who's in control, but I know it's not me and I know it's not you.
Humility is a great word because it's also related to being humiliated. And it sounds to me like in one of your other talks when referencing telling the truth, something I was thinking, I don't know if this is the case. I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are and I want to hear what your thoughts are. Is that there are truths, so we can just begin to never lie and tell the truth. But then there are also lies that we have told in the past. And do we come forward with those? Well, that's much more tricky because there's a mountain of them. So one option is you confess all those lies to this higher power. But you have to believe in, quote unquote, in this higher power. Otherwise, it's not humiliating to confess. And there's something about walking through the fire that is where the redemptive qualities are. that if there's no consequence to it, then your confession was for naught. It was as if you just told a cup. And maybe the cup to some people is divine. And in that case, that's fine, but that's rare.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, when we think about a higher power, however we define it, there has to be a sense of shock and awe, and maybe even a little bit of terror, before that the word power with higher power has any meaning, right? Actually, Kierkegaard wrote about this concept of, Kierkegaard's the coiner of the phrase, the leap of faith. And he wrote about this concept of infinite resignation, that before you can even have this leap of faith, there has to be this kind of infinite resignation, of recognizing, in a way, the profoundest humility of our own efforts to really get to that place, that a higher power can transport us.
And while we're on the topic of speaking the truth or telling the truth, can you outline why that's important? And not just neurobiologically, like not just, okay, the prefrontal cortex is strengthened, but somehow psychologically as well.
Yeah. So this idea of like radical honesty, it comes from my work with patients over the years, finding that those who are able to get into recovery from the severest addictions and stay in recovery are the ones that have learned that they can't lie about anything. So not only can they not lie about, their use, they can't lie about why they're late for a meeting, what they had for breakfast, where they're going to be Saturday night. It's those trivial lies that they have to be the most careful about, because that will lead them back into the bigger lies about using. And to me, that's fascinating. I mean, what is it about this kind of embracing this concept of radical honesty and never lying that helps people with addiction? I think it works on a bunch of different levels. One of the levels that it works on is just their own insight and awareness of what they're actually doing. So part of what happens when we lie, and the average adult tells 1 to 2 lies per day, is that we're not just lying to other people, we're largely also lying to ourselves. And to talk about Freud's unconscious, we're allowing certain themes and things that we do and say and think to remain in those dark recesses of our minds. Whereas if we're articulating something, there's something very, very powerful of turning our inner life into words that we share with another human. It really makes it real in a way that it's not otherwise, and it hugely enhances our awareness of it. So that's one of the big things. The other thing is that telling the truth profoundly enhances intimacy. We're deathly afraid of people knowing our faults and weaknesses, our deep desires, our shameful desires, whatever it is. We're afraid that if we tell people, they'll, run away from us. But in fact, the opposite happens. If we really share our shame, people come to us. They want to be closer to us. It enhances trust. So it's a wonderful way of augmenting intimacy. And very often that kind of deep intimacy or connection to other human beings is the best antidote to addiction. I just saw a patient today with he has a sex addiction, and he was experiencing intense cravings. He and his wife had a bunch of things to do around the house, and he was kind of dreading doing those things. And, he's struggling in his addiction, and out of the blue came this craving to act out. That basically he was planning that after she went to bed, he would look at pornography, which is, part of his definition of relapse. And then it occurred to him, well, you know what? I'm just going to let her know what's going on for me. And he said, I just want to let you know I'm having a lot of cravings right now of wanting to act out, and I'm formulating a plan. And she responded by saying, thank you for sharing that with me. Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything that I can do to help?
That's sweet.
Well, even better, after they talked about it, and she went to bed, he had no cravings. So his cravings went away. And really what's so key there is that, really what was the craving in search of? It was in search of some intimate human connection at a point when he was feeling low. So instead of escaping to his, addiction to try to fill that feeling, he actually faced it head on expressed his inner life and his shameful cravings to his wife, and then got intimacy from that. And that's just a wonderful example of how being truthful in the moment can really bring people together. And then the craving goes, which is really awesome.
So if I was to recapitulate, please let me know if this is correct or incorrect. When you lie, you feel as if you're manipulating and you're getting away with something, like you've achieved something positive. Otherwise, you wouldn't have lied. But what's actually happening is that you poison yourself. You've corrupted your heart, and your heart is a large aspect of you. And further, and maybe you don't know this, but my background's in math and filmmaking.
Yeah.
There's a screenwriting adage that says the more specific the pain, the more applicable it is, or the more relatable it is. And further, the more general you try to be, the less relatable it is, paradoxically. In other words, you think that you're going to repulse someone by revealing your innermost, specific, painful, personal thoughts. But what actually happens is that you endear people to you. And then further, what you've articulated is that you also get endeared to other people. So I don't know if I interpreted what you said correctly in my own inference or my own translation, but tell me what you think.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I guess I might use slightly different phrasing, but I mean, I think you're, similar themes. I think, what I touched on is just how telling the truth makes us more aware and gives us more insight into what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
Because when we don't tell the truth, we are not aware of these behaviors. They remain in our unconscious. And then we continue to lie to ourselves. So that's one of the primary ways that this radical truth telling can be helpful, is that it increases our knowledge base, right? Then it increases our perception.
If you enjoyed that clip, then the full podcast is out right now. You can click around here. Enjoy. Subscribe to Theories of Everything to get notified of upcoming podcasts, as there are new full-length podcasts every week on the topics of mathematics, physics, consciousness, free will, and AI.